This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Union alert. We've got a union announcement.
Rear.
We've got some new union members we need to introduce. Let's welcome to the union Joe Peters and John Bordeaux. I'm gonna guess it's Bordeaux and not Bordeaux, because
pretty sure it's Bordeaux.
It's Bordeaux. I know I have a problem with pronunciation. Both my actual self and my AI self have problems.
But it's funny that they are bad in different ways.
I like to spread it around. I don't want to be
AI Tim gets all the names right, but then just mispronounces things like genre.
What can I say? My personality is imprinted onto that, and there's nothing we can do about it.
It's all part of the brand.
But welcome, Joe and John, to the union. We look forward to your 80s metal picks. And if you don't know, if you only listen to our 90s rock podcast, you might not know that we have an 80s metal podcast as well that we launched this year. It's every other week talking about 80s metal albums that maybe you're familiar with, or like me, not familiar with, because this is the Chip and Jay arena, and I am merely a poor peasant tossed into the center, being torn apart by the lions.
You're the student.
Yes, I am the student. Exactly.
And we appreciate your fresh perspective and young, youthful eyes.
And the one that just went live was my pick, actually. It was Faster Pussycat.
That's
and right. I'm glad we got to talk about that record. Strangely enough, this episode, which is also a poll,
that's your segue.
It's mine. Okay.
Oh yeah, okay. Back to back Tim picks.
Back to back.
This one had to earn it though.
I did.
This had to win a poll.
I had to lobby. I had to press the flesh. I had to throw some sawbucks out there, make some promises, kiss some babies, shake some babies, kiss some hands, that kind of thing. And we do the poll. Anybody can. So I've been letting it go for years. I didn't submit anything to our digmeoutpodcast.com suggestion album page. And then a couple albums lost. And I just became furious that we had not talked about these bands or albums. And I'm like, dang it, I'm going to submit. I don't care. I know I'm a co-host, but I just feel like these are worthy artists and albums to talk about. So I did, and I won. I defeated you all. You're all losers.
You're like Trump. You're gonna give yourself a trophy at your own golf club.
Yes, exactly.
Way to go, champion. Way to go.
So we have held a tournament, and the winner is me. So,
shocker.
For our March tournament, we kept it to 9 albums. We did not do the 18, just 9 records. And I was worried. I was like, okay, this seems like I'm being set up to fail.
Yeah.
Especially when I looked at the competition and I saw Temple of the Dog, and I was like, well, now I'm screwed.
I thought for sure that was going to win.
Totally expected that to win.
To me, that's like, if you want to, go back to when we started this podcast and ask me, give me 5 albums that you know for sure that you're going to review, I would have said that had to be in there.
Absolutely. And yet here we are at episode 700 and something, and we still haven't gotten to Temple of the Dog. Here were the records that were submitted for our March poll. Body Exit Mind by the New Fast Automatic Daffodils. That was suggested by Jeremy Amen. The Dam Builders album Encendedor. I don't know how to pronounce that. That was suggested by Robert Camb. The album If Arsenic Fails, Try Algebra by Pop Unknown, suggested by Willie Dillon. Now, Eric Peterson gave us a pronunciation.
Okay.
David Vanian.
You're messing it up.
And The Phantom, self-titled. Eric Peterson suggested that. Vanian.
He's the singer of The Damned.
He's the
correct?
singer of The Damned. There we go.
There you go.
Storm Warning by Count Raven, suggested by Gabriel Gutierrez. Women in Technology by Whitetown. You know the song Your Woman. That was the big single in the 90s. Suggested by Keith Badge. Temple of the Dog, Mike Bankhead. And Voodoo Highway by Badlands was suggested by Kevin Monk. I suggested In It for the Money by Supergrass, to which I said, In It for the Killer Songs. Now, I believe that this had been in a poll, or some Supergrass had been in a poll and lost. So that's what drew my ire and why I felt I needed to submit that.
It would have had to be this because we did the first record already.
What are you talking about?
Didn't we do with the first record?
No.
What the what?
You think we did Supergrass?
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you we have never talked about Supergrass.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we've talked about them.
I thought we did Ashikoko.
Tables. No, we've never done any Supergrass albums. That's why I was so aghast. I was aghast.
My memory is a wreck. I swear to God we had done that record. Okay.
Nope. So we got some comments because there was only one round. I'm going to read them. Jeremy Mann said going with new fast automatic daffodils, which was his pick. He said, since it's my recommendation, but would love to also throw some support behind Temple of the Dog and Badlands. Would be cool to see Badlands get the sweep. If you don't know, we'll be talking about Badlands on a future 80s metal. So it would have been, they only had 2 records, right?
3.
Oh, they had 3. Okay, never mind.
Yes.
Phil Hampton said, no contest, Temple of the Dog. Would love to hear the team discuss this. I like to be referred to as a team. Like we're like one of those wrestling teams from the 90s and the 80s. Yeah. Junkyard Dog and
the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov.
There you go. You're Sheik, I'm Volkov.
Rock and Roll Express.
Yep.
The Road Warriors.
Darren Svedson said, I respectfully disagree. While I love this album, also feel like I know everything about its history, songs, creation. Not sure what's left to uncover. Then they debated and they a lot of respectfully back and forth. I respect your opinion. A lot of respectful. Darren Svedson said, Supergrass gets my vote. Power pop that should have been bigger. Right up Dig Me Out's wheelhouse. Joe Roland said, Supergrass for me. Love that album, and it's still my overall favorite by them. Temple of the Dog, while fantastic, just feels too obvious. Eric Peterson said, well, he was his pick. David Vanian, of course, I threw it in the hopper. That said, I don't think DMO is covered anywhere near enough lounge, rockabilly, 90s projects from notable 70s, 80s artists. That's a legit observation. He's not wrong about that. Ian McIver said, voting for Whitetown, while it doesn't reach the level of other electronic acts reached in 1997, like the Chemical Brothers, Daft Punk, The Prodigy, there are moments on this album that are good, despite the single Your Woman being the obvious standout track, making this album a bit uneven. Rudy Stoll said, we must cover that brief window where Eddie was tolerable. Or Edward was tolerable. Yes. Kyle Bittner said, going with the Dam Builders, I recommended Ruby Red a while back, and it didn't win, hoping this one does, as it's just as good. Patrick Tessa said, I'm enjoying the Dam Builders record right now. This deserved consideration. Justin Moore said, it's a toss-up between Supergrass and Temple of the Dog, but the grass edge it. It holds a special place in my heart and would like to get it an airing on the show. Patrick Testa said Tim is simply taunting Jay with the Supergrass horn section. Whitney Bueller said Supergrass, Vadim Taver, in it for the money. Darren Leach, Supergrass gets my vote. Their debut is a 90s indie classic, and there was no second album syndrome when in it for the money. So there, I mean, those comments, they unified behind Supergrass. You can see that. And that was thanks to lots of electioneering.
Your bribes.
My bribes. Hey, whatever works. It got Kennedy in the White House, and it got me on the poll here. Whatever it takes.
they got you on your own podcast.
It got me on my own It got me to be able to talk about something I actually want. No, I'm not, just kidding. I like to talk about all the records that we don't know as well. So Jay, I know that you are familiar with Supergrass.
Yeah.
I'm betting you own, if not all their records, most of them.
I do. I'm trying to remember. This is the first one I bought, though. And I don't clearly remember how I got to it because 97. I really don't know, but I bought it when it came out. And I cannot tell you why. I was gonna say like heard it in a record store, but that would have been like later.
Right. That would have been like 98, 99.
Yeah.
At the earliest.
Maybe MTV. I'm not quite sure, but I bought this record when it came out, and then I went back and I liked the record after this a lot, and I think I went back and got Ashikoko after that. And then I've been following them ever since.
I remember getting the single for Cheapskate in the radio station. Like, this was my last year working in the radio station in college. And I remember hearing that single. I remember the video for Sun Hits the Sky being on MTV. Now, it might not have been in heavy rotation, but I feel like because this is the year of Oasis releasing Be Here Now, and it was a huge event when they released that, not just in the UK, but it was big here too. It's also the year of Song 2 and Blur. So like British bands were kind of getting some push here, even more so than when What's the Story came out and that whole thing. I also remember seeing the videos for like This Is Hardcore by Pulp. Like, that was, again, not in heavy rotation, but it was on. So that's probably where I got hip to the band, because I didn't know the first record at all when it came out. And then I got the new record when it came out, which, I mean, the Supergrass self-titled after this, which was 99. I didn't know a lot of history of the band. I knew that they were brothers, or there are brothers in the band. And also they have one of the greatest lead singer names of all time with Gaz Coombs. His brother,
pretty classic.
It is. It's such a British, 90s alternative name. It's up there with Bez from Happy Mondays and Black Grape. Like,
if there was a Spinal Tap version of a Britpop band, a member would have to be named Gaz.
Yes. So Rob, his brother, plays keyboards. But what's interesting is that Rob wasn't actually ever an official member until the fourth album. Like, he just kind of played with them, but he never really joined the band until they made, I think, Road to Ruin, which is weird because he has songwriting credits and he's on the records and he toured with them, but for whatever reason. So the band never had any other members than the four guys who were in the band, which was Gaz Coombs, lead vocals and guitar, Rob Coombs, his brother, on keyboards, Mick Quinn on bass and backing vocals, and Danny Goffey on drums and backing vocals. Mick Quinn, after Supergrass separated, went on to play with Swerve Driver when they reunited. So if you might have seen Mick Quinn, I didn't realize that I saw Mick Quinn here in Columbus when they played at the Scully's here in Columbus. But anyway, a little bit of history about the band Supergrass. They actually formed when they were teenagers as a band called the Jennifers. It was Gaz and Danny playing with Danny's brother Nick Goffey and a guy named Andy Davies. And Danny and Nick Goffey are the sons of a former Top Gear presenter named Chris Goffey. And they started playing around Oxford in the UK. They got some gigs. They ended up recording a demo, couple of songs, got them some, notification, got them some attention. They just did some singles for Nude Records, and then they split up in '92 because Andy Davies went to college or university, and Nick Goffey went on to become a music video director with one of his friends. So Gaz and Mick are or Gaz is working at a restaurant, and he meets Mick Quinn, who'd be the bass player, and they form the band, which they call Theodore Supergrass. That's the original name of the band. And after 2 months, they went, let's just get rid of the Theodore and call it Supergrass. And they brought in his brother Rob, and they already had Danny. It's only his brother left to go directing videos. Danny was still going to play drums, and they start playing gigs around Oxford in '93, and they end up getting a John Peel session based on some pre I Should Coco singles. They released Caught by the Fuzz on a local record label called Backbeat Records. That's their first single. It's not bad for a first single. And then copies sell out because of the John Peel appearance. Parlophone signs them, and they go and end up in being Enemy and Melody Maker's single of the week. This is a band that has just formed, has one song recorded, and they're the single of the week in Enemy and the Melody Maker.
Isn't this what the British music press loved at the time?
1994, man. Britpop is going crazy.
Well, they would pluck these bands out of obscurity, and then they would just trash them after that.
So then they released a couple more songs as singles, Man-Sized Rooster and Lenny. They finally get the whole album out in May of '95. It goes to #1 on the UK albums chart. Sells 500,000 in the UK, 1 million worldwide. And then they released the single All Right, which goes to the top 3 in the UK for a month. Ends up peaking at 2, but it stays in the top 3. They tour for 18 months after that, which is just crazy to think about, just being on tour for 18 months. They start recording for the next record, but they don't really have a lot of material. So most of the material written for In It for the Money was written on the spot in the studio. Like they didn't write a lot on the road. They had Going Out was one of the songs, and was actually the first single that they released for the album. And then they put out the album we're going to talk about in April of 1997. So Going Out was released in '96, in February of '96. So that's that's 5 months before the record came out. That's a long time.
Yeah,
that's a lot of lead time. And like I said, they only had 2 songs before entering the studio, which is crazy. They started recording that in fall '96 and then put it out in April '97.
In the '70s, that's a whole album cycle.
Yeah.
Like you'd release the album and have toured already.
So when they went to Parlophone with the finished record, they had some ideas for the album title, and they were like not happy with it. One of the album was Children of the Monkey Basket was one of the album titles. And supposedly the label said, look, if you just come up with a label with a title for this record, we will pay you just to get the freaking title done. And so they named it In It for the Money as a joke.
That's pretty good.
There's actually 2, I didn't realize this until reading. there's actually two different album covers. The album that you cover that we're familiar with them having like acoustic instruments, there's an upright bass and acoustic guitar, is the one for the most of the world. But in Japan, there is like an oil painting of the three main members of the band, done by a friend of one of Danny Goffey, the drummers. And I looked at that, I was like, that's a completely different looking band. Like, I don't know that I would have bought that album cover based on that album cover.
Right. Yeah. The album cover that we know is just so iconic, and very much associated with how the band sounds.
Yep. So it peaked at number 2 on the UK album chart. Didn't go to number 1 like the first record, but it did actually sell a little bit more than the first record globally. So Gaz Coombs said, means we can sleep at night. We actually did better than our first record. And this is the one I was really shocked by. Liam Howlett of The Prodigy, who put out a massive record in 97, The Fat of the Land, had huge singles.
Yeah.
He said In It for the Money was his favorite album of the year. And I was like, that's shocking. This is a guy who does electronica music, Smack My Bitch Up.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is the best album of the year.
That's unexpected.
It got pretty much universal acclaim when it came out. Q Magazine gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Guardian 4 out of 5. AllMusic 4.5 out of 5. NME 8 out of 10. Pitchfork 8.9 out of 10. Spin only gave it a 7 out of 10, and Rolling Stone gave it a 3.5 out of 5.
Out of 5. Okay.
Yeah. 3.5 out of 5.
Sounds
not
about
out
right.
of 10, but and this did, again, like the sales were backed up by chart position. This charted all around the world, not necessarily top 10, but we're talking like top 20, top 30, that kind of stuff. And then a lot of year-end, awards for the band. And it's actually listed in the 1001 albums you must hear before you die book that came out in 2005. This was produced by John Cornfield, who the band worked with, I believe, for this record and the next one. I think he worked on the self-titled Supergrass record as well. And there is a bonus CD that you can get, which includes alternative mixes and stuff, but also there's like 7 or 8 songs that were not released on the record, like demos of other songs that you can get.
Is that a vinyl only thing, or
no? It's a CD, but it's like a bonus CD that you can get that was actually released at the time. Like, I don't know if you like, there were a couple of records in the 90s like that. I remember when I bought Bad Motorfinger, it came with the version I got, had a bonus like 3 or 4 song EP of I think it was all covers. There was like a Rolling Stone cover on there and a couple other songs, but it has a name. I don't remember what it was called, but there was a couple bands that did that they put out like a bonus EP in some versions of the CD that came out. So that's all about Supergrass. In terms of after this, like I said, they put out the self-titled album in 1999. That's followed by Life on Other Planets was the record that came out after that. That was released in 2002. It was produced by Tony Hoffer, who has worked with a ton of bands. He worked with like Beck. This was his 3rd record. His first record was Beck's Midnight Vultures, and his second record was 10,000 Hertz Legend by Air. And then after that, he's worked with Phoenix and Bell and Sebastian and Silver Sun Pickups, just a huge list of bands. That was also put out by Parlophone. And then they released a compilation, Supergrass's 10, in 2004. In 2005, they released Road to Ruin. It was on Parlophone. In 2008, they released the album Diamond Hoo-Ha. And that was the last official album by the band. So I read this is interesting. While they were in the studio, after making that record, they toured, then they were back in the studio. They were making a new record called what was it called? It was like oh, Release the Drones.
Mm,
And they had been listening to a lot of krautrock, like can and drone music. They were
oh,
swapping instruments during the recording process and playing each other's
oh,
instruments.
oh boy.
And they said they wanted to do a really collaborative record, try something different. They were almost done with it. It had a scheduled release date, and then they pulled it, and it's never been released.
Mm,
And since then, they've played some reunion shows. They did the Taylor Hawkins tribute record or tribute concert because
yep.
Taylor Hawkins had expressed that he was a huge Supergrass fan.
Mhm.
Um, so they did that, and that was their last show. Like they basically said we're done. With a couple of they did a couple of reunion shows, and that was it. And then Gaz Coombs has put out like 4 solo albums. I mentioned Mick Quinn is now in Swerve Driver, and the other guys have gone on to do other things. So it's likely we're not going to get any more Supergrass based on all their comments. Seemed like the last recording process was the one that kind of broke the band, and they were like all going in different directions musically, and they just didn't want to do it anymore.
Yep.
So, but that last Gaz Coom record that came out, I think was last year, was quite good. So
Yeah. I gave it a couple spins. I liked it.
let's get into the record. In It for the Money. Jay, I picked this record, so you tell
Mhm.
me what works for you on In It for the Money by Supergrass.
I forgot how good the rhythm section of this band is. It's been a while since I listened to this album. It's got this, it's tight and high energy, but it also feels, I think, when it's working really well, like they're just about to go off the rails. And I think the closest band I can think of that is similar to would be The Who. I even
Mm-hmm.
hear some like Keith Moon and some of the drum fills and some John Entwistle and some of the bass parts. I didn't make that connection, I think, when I first really got into the band. I was hearing more of like the immediate Britpop stuff with like maybe more of a more interesting rhythmic take to it. But I think, cemented in my head as I reviewed it now with a little bit of time and space, where they were coming from there. I think you hear it in Richard III, Sun Hits the Sky. That song has an amazing bass line. Cheapskate, it's got this funky groove in the verse, but then it breaks to this big euphoric, Britpoppy chorus. You know, so it kind of playing with like being this rhythm-oriented band, but then also sort of more of a melodic band, all in the same song. You Can See Me is another example where it's got this really cool mellow kind of rolling groove in the verse, and then the chorus just goes to this ascending riff that's borderline off the rails. Uh, so I think that pocket of that group of songs is like a good representation of that high energy, but still very solid in the pocket rhythm section. And it's just being pushed a little bit to that edge, kind of in the way that the Who did, right? I think at their best, especially the live stuff and the early stuff, where they were always just right at that edge of like this sounds like a type band, but you could hear it like going off the rails and sounding like a hot mess any second now. And I think that really brings a lot of like tension and just interest to the album, keeps you engaged. I also like, this some money was spent on this record. You can tell there's a lot of production here. It takes some unexpected turns in terms of some other sounds they start bringing in that I think work really well. And they don't just, some of these things they're bringing in, they're not just like layering them in. They become a bit of a showcase. So the organ in it for the money and going out is like crucial to the vibe of that song. The horns in Tonight become really important to that song, to the point where like the break section, instead of a guitar solo or whatever, it's, you know, opens up space to like hear the horn part. The synths that they bring into Late in the Day, Sun Hits the Sky, It's Not Me, you know, using these unexpected analog synth sounds that you wouldn't think would work on a record that sounds like this, and that, you know, it's a little earthy sounding, I think, in, you know, like a power trio, dirty guitars, you know, room sound. You wouldn't think layering in like 80s style synths and to that music would work so great, but it sounds amazing. And when they bring those in, again, they're not like just layered in or sort of subtle. They're like, boom, you know, making a point with it and grabbing your attention with it. Some Fender Rhodes on You Can See Me is another example of, if you really like pay attention to what's going on rhythmically there, a lot of that is being driven by like how you play that part on the Rhodes. So, you know, these use of keys and horns and even some of the background vocals are almost instrument-like, really bring a unique, I think, sound to the band, to the production, and again keep it unexpected and interesting, and not, you know, always straightforward. You know, there's another dimension here this band can go in by bringing these other instruments in, by using keyboards, not just guitars, that I think I kind of got at the time, but, you know, now when I hear it, my ears really can pull it out and understand like, oh, that's what makes this different from another Britpop band that wouldn't be able to, either from a rhythmic standpoint, be as, you know, I guess dangerous sounding as this band can be, and then from a creative standpoint, be able to bring in keyboards and horns and other instruments in a way that feels like vital and not indulgent. So that's what stood out to me, that I thought worked really well. What worked for you?
I had a lot of the same thoughts when it came to reassessing what I thought of this band in terms of influence, you know, back in the 90s versus now. In the 90s, you go, oh, there's some Beatles and some Stones influence and Kinks, that kind of stuff. But hearing it now and hearing, like you mentioned, the looseness, but also the ability to just like gel in a moment, it very much reminds me of the Who. And The Sun Hits the Sky is a perfect example. Like that bass line, that do-do-do-do-do, that's so
Yep.
Entwistle.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect bass line. And because they're a three-piece, they're able to feature each instrument in unique ways. It's not really interesting. It's not a showy album in terms of performance. It's just so tasty in terms of everything that they choose.
Yeah.
You know, you're listening to Richard III. It's got this huge guitar part, just two chords, really the verse. And then you get a theremin solo.
Yeah.
You're like, what? That's the part where like Noel Gallagher would do a huge solo there, or if it's Blur, you're gonna get a guitar solo. It's probably a little weirder, but it's still gonna probably be a guitar solo there. And this one is not following that playbook in terms of, it has the energy, I guess you would say, of those, of like the same influence. You hear Going Out is a very Stonesy kind of song. It sounds like She's a Rainbow in terms of that like loose drumming thing with the fills, and you mentioned the backing vocals. A lot of backing vocals that remind me of what the Stones would do. But they even expand on that, and it has this great amalgamation of all these little weird sounds popping up that go, oh well, that's kind of like the horns, okay, yeah, that kind of sounds Beatlesque, but then this over here is definitely not Beatlesque. Like they would never do that, but this, I guess the Who would, or that structure is a little bit more singer-songwritery or something. Like it's just it's hard to pin down, even though a lot of it sounds familiar, but they do such a great job of like mixing things up. These songs are all really tight. They get to jam a little bit on Sun Hits the Sky. There's like an outro, like I mentioned, with that bass line, but it kind of reminds me of the end of there's a couple of like Can't Hear Me Knockin' has a big like bongo conga ending. They do it a little bit differently because it's like a blues based song, and this one again rides that like outro part for a while in the same way. A lot of bands, they wouldn't pull that off right. Like they would do a bunch of noise or something, and it just kind of like it sails into the sunset. It's nice. Like it matches the vibe of the song so well. And I am shocked at that they wrote these songs. All but two of these were written in the studio, and one of them was Going Out. One of them, Going Out, existed before, so they're pretty much writing like Richard III and Tonight, Late in the Day, Sun Hits the Sky, Cheapskate, You Can See Me. These are amazing songs, and they just like banged them out in the studio one after another in a very short period of time, which is bonkers to me, knowing how the studio can be pressure. You're following, especially these guys, they're on the road for 18 months. They're following up their debut album, which was a hit, and they've got to come up with something. And they come up with this rollicking. I think the thing that makes me like this record more than almost any other Britpop record is it puts a smile on my face. Like these songs are so fun and energetic. They're not dour in any way. And when he hits the so in Tonight, I believe it's Tonight. Let me just double check here real quick. I think it's Tonight. I want to, yes. So there's like an A section, a B section, and then it gets to a chorus. Then they go back to the A section, and then the B section chorus, and then they hit this huge bridge where it just like explodes.
Yeah.
So many bands could not pull that up, could not get to that bridge. Like the song would just be the broken part and the chorus. Maybe you do a breakdown of the broken part with like a little bit of a guitar solo or something like that. When they hit that bridge and it's like big open chords and it's major sounding, it just it sounds like the house lights are coming up and everybody's dancing, and it's just like the most fun ever. And I love that they can deliver on that promise, like, oh, something big's coming, and then it hits you and you're like, yeah, they hit it, they nailed it. And they do it over and over again on this record. Like when they need to hit the big chorus or the big bridge or something, the hook, they find the hook. And I mean, this album had, like I said, they released 5 singles between February of 96 and October of 97. Going Out was pre-album release. Then Richard III, Sun Hits the Sky, Cheapskate, Late in the Day. Sun Hits, that's Tonight isn't even a single. How is Tonight not a single?
I don't know.
And so, and You Can See Me, again, that's a super cool song. For another band, that's a single.
Yeah.
And that for them, it's the 10th song. It's a deep album track.
Kind of surprised Going Out was a single over those songs, but
I'm gonna guess it's because it was one they actually had finished.
Yeah.
Like they probably recorded that early.
It's definitely got the Britpop Beatles influence going on. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Trying to tap into the Oasis thing.
Yeah, I think absolutely. We've gushed enough about this record. Is there anything that doesn't work for you on the record?
Yeah, I don't think I cared at the time as much, but I found myself thrown a little bit by the way the album starts, because it does start with this very kind of ominous feel and darker feel than the rest of the album does. It was a strange way to, In It for the Money is just a strange song to start with. There's also a couple moments here where it's also like a non-traditional song structure.
Mm-hmm.
So it just it sets a weird, I think, expectation for the rest of the album. There's also a couple on here where it sounds like they probably, aren't the strongest written songs they've ever done and were probably put together in the studio. The performances are fine, and that's what saves them. But G Song is one I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little lumbering. It actually reminds me a lot of Joe Walsh.
Really?
Yeah. Think about 70s Joe Walsh solo stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, yeah.
Especially the way the vocal is, and the verse reminds me a lot of that. It's just it's a cool groove. It's just not an amazing, pop song. It's Not Me is another one. Probably though, Hollow Little Rain is the other. It's a 6/8 feel. They kind of get stuck in that
Mm-hmm.
in that groove, and it's a little, meandering and not super hooky. Again, it sounds great. Those songs all sound great. The performances are great. They just don't sound like the strongest material, potentially because they were put together in the studio. Anything not work for you?
I thought about this a lot because, like you mentioned, G Song and How Little Rain, they're fine songs. They suffer in comparison to how good the singles are on the record. If there wasn't 5, 6, killer singles on this record, then they wouldn't seem so underwhelming compared to the rest The only one that I would cut if we're getting there is Sometimes I Make You Sad. It's just sort of a goofy experiment. Like the whole rhythm section is just them going oomfa, oomfa, oomfa,
Yeah.
oomfa. And then I read that the mandolin is actually not. They
Yeah.
just played a guitar solo and then sped it up twice as fast.
Yeah.
I,
I, yeah.
it's fine. It's a fine
I
song to end the
kind of like
record.
it as like it's got that like cheeky humor. Like you can imagine them screwing around the studio, and it's still kind of a fun sounding little track.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't need to be almost 3 minutes, but I hear you. I'm a little less
Th-
forgiving of it just because I think it matches what I think of their personality.
right.
You know?
I do love the opening track because it to me it is like a modern Pete Townsend, like goofy, weird movie, production type thing. Like I can imagine that the start of a play or not of a
Yeah.
musical. Like it sounds like that, like it's all dark and stuff. And then when they kick in and he's like, I got my mind made up, and it's becomes this regal thing where it's like there's this whole orchestration and thing, and it sounds like, oh my god, we're getting Sergeant Pepper's Part 2. Like what's going on here? This is so cool.
Yeah, I can hear that. I think that's how I react to it initially, but for some reason revisiting it now, as I broke the album down, I was like, wow, this is a really weird way to start this album. But
I just
I hear
imagine
you.
Gaz Coombs with like a top hat and a cane, and he's like leading a band down the street. And there's like, guys with the big, hitting the
Yeah,
drum, and there's horn players and things like that. Like it
right.
just, it's so over the top that it works for me. And it also,
You can,
again, it has a lightness and a fun that Blur and Oasis did not have. Like they were
yeah,
very serious bands, um, for the
true.
most part. And this just has a little bit more fun, which I guessing that's why they never connected with an American audience, is
Hmm.
because I mean, think about like the next record. You've got Pumping on Your Stereo, which features them as Muppets in the video, and they're
Yeah.
actually saying humping on your stereo. Like
Which is
they
a
had,
super hooky song too.
oh my god, that one and Moving.
Yep.
And yeah, there's just, again, that's another record which has like 4 or 5 killer singles, and there and some really good album tracks, but the album tracks again are like pale in comparison to how good the singles are. But I don't, there's nothing on here that I was like skip, like got to get to the next song. this
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one's
for sure.
bad. They don't they don't muck around with a lot of experimentation. What they do is they figure out how to experiment in a way that is palatable. Like you said, doing an analog synth solo, doing a theremin solo, adding horns. I mean, how many are there? 3 songs with horns? Is that how many? Maybe more. I mean, this
In it for
isn't
the
like,
money, going out, or I'm sorry, tonight. There's at least three.
yeah. So it's not like they just brought in a trumpet player for one song. Like
Oh no, no, no. Yeah.
they brought some really interesting sounds to this record. And Rob Coombs, the keyboard player, really is kind of the secret weapon. Like you said, you got like a great like church organ type thing that's happening at the beginning of the song. There are organs and keyboards. There's one part of, it might be Late in the Day, where it's just like a piano. It's like a or organ and a synth happening at the same time. He's like got the like woo woo,
Yeah.
and then there's also an organ happening along with like an acoustic guitar. And it's just, there's so much tasty little nuggets that are happening like that, and they are good about not dragging it on. Like sometimes it's just 2 bars and then they're
Hmm.
changing to something, but you get the melody, and they find the way to call back to something in the song. It just,
Yeah.
it blows me away like how well this is constructed in such a short period of time.
Those ads also take they almost give your ear a break from the guitars too,
Hmm.
in an interesting way, because the guitar tones are pretty like dirty and kind of, a little muddy. Uh, and when they switch to those other instruments, it's just like a little palate cleanser. You sort of your ears shift over and focus on that theremin or the synth part, and then they come back to this rag guitar riff, that now sounds fresh again because you heard this cleaner sound. It's really interesting because it's, I don't know, playing a little music and hearing other bands try to incorporate instruments into, songs like this that are a little outside what you'd expect. It can be hard. It can be a little jarring, and it doesn't feel jarring at all in this record. It feels complimentary.
I don't know what he's singing about a lot of the time. I just take it as it happens. And like when he says, I am a doctor, I'll be your doctor. I'm like, okay, dude, I don't know why I need a doctor right now, but
Yeah.
if you want to be the doctor, that's fine with me. There's all sorts of things, that great little hooks that he did on the first record too. Like, you know, Caught by the Fuzz is a great little song. All Right. All Right should have been an anthem of youth in the 90s in the United States. It should not have just been a 3 week or whatever 3 month UK hit. Like, that is a fantastic song that deserves another life. So why do you think this didn't do as well in the US? It didn't really chart here. I think it, what did it get to? It made it to the Heat Seekers Billboard chart. That's it. Like, it didn't make the top 200. I don't think it went platinum here even. Like, it didn't sell 500,000 copies. And you
Hmm.
got Oasis, who are about to drop Be Here Now and sell a billion copies of an okay record. Blur's going to blow a ton of, or going to get a ton of fans because of song 2. And like, why couldn't this record catch on here? I think it's just too British in some ways.
Yeah. It's a little dense. I don't think it's as simple as some of those, especially the singles from the other bands that were breaking, and the Britpop stuff. There's not, although, we can hear the hooks and think they're, really well crafted, whatnot. Uh, I can hear them being a little bit too complicated for music at that point, at least, American commercial radio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, this isn't as straightforward as song 2.
Yeah.
And if
I
you're
mean,
talking
think
about
about how,
97,
I mean, I love that song still, but think about how dumb that song is. I mean,
yeah.
geez, oh man, it's as basic as it gets.
And if you're talking about 1997 rock hits, you're talking about what's this is the year of like Flagpole Sitta. This is the year of Everlong by the Foo Fighters, Semi Charmed
Mm.
Life by Third Eye Blind. You got to have a doot doot doot, or
Yeah.
something like that. What else was big this year? Song
Doesn't
2, Woohoo again.
hmm
Bittersweet Symphony was a big single this year. The Impression That I
hmm
Get by the Boss Tones, 3 a.m. by Matchbox 20, Fiona Apple's Criminal, Sex and Candy, Torn by Natalie Imbruglia, Tub Thumping. This was the year of Tub Thumping, really. I thought that was earlier.
This is the year.
This is the year.
This is when it happened.
But then this is also the year of like Sister Hazel and Tonic, and like the third wave of alternative
Yeah.
rock is
Yeah.
happening. Uh what else is this is the year of Brick by Ben Folds. Walking on the Sun by Smash Mouth. Yeah. So I guess when you're looking at those big singles, you're like, how is Richard the Third gonna fit in or late in the day with those songs, especially with the quirky keyboards. That almost makes it even worse in terms of like a radio song. Like, oh, where's the guitar solo?
Right.
Like, that's what a radio programmer is probably looking in 1997. Like,
Right.
why is there a theremin on? Probably don't even know. It's just like, what's this stupid keyboard solo?
Yeah.
Fly doesn't have one, and from the Sugar Ray song, that doesn't have a keyboard solo.
Right.
So I guess that
Yeah, we
makes.
were at peak dumbness for in terms of radio
This
in
is
1997. So
Lakini's Juice by Live, which is
yeah, things were kind of going downhill at this point.
you're on the second Better Than Ezra album. You're on the Friction Baby. You're on the second Counting Crows record. Yeah. There's some quality stuff that did not stand up to time. There it is, Bloodhound Gang. This is the year of Bloodhound Gang.
Oh God.
Fire, Water, Burn. So finally, I make mention of Bloodhound Gang every once in a while, and they finally catch up with them here. So overall ratings, Jay, what do you say about In It for the Money, Supergrass?
I see it's a worthy album. Uh, it's a sweet spot for me. I mean, this is was played a lot for me at the time. I liked it then. I'm appreciating it in a different way now. So I think it holds up really well too. I don't think anything about this really sounds dated. This could be believably released now, and it would feel totally right. So there's a couple weak spots here and there. It's not a perfect album, but I definitely think it's worthy. Where are you at?
I'm also at a worthy album. And I feel like looking back now, when I want to listen to like a full Britpop album, this is probably the one over What's the Story, Morning Glory,
Yeah.
over there's a lot of Blur albums I like, but there's a lot of filler. I feel like some of those albums are like 15 songs long,
Yeah.
and they experiment, and some of those experiments aren't as interesting as what Supergrass does. And I just like their approach. I like the energy, the I don't know how to say it, but the sunny vibe that I get when I listen to this.
There's definitely a performance aspect to it that's really I appreciate with time. Like you can tell this is 3 or 4 guys in the studio really working their butts off to like get these grooves down and figure out all these parts, and like they're playing well off each other. You don't have a rhythm section that sounds this good if they're not putting in a lot of hours, working these songs out and jam and just playing. Which some of those other records you're talking about, I don't know that I think of those bands like that. They sound like more song oriented or studio productions.
This album feels to me like the one where if I was over in the UK, I would do the pogo. Like I would definitely pogo up and down to this record, as the Brits do to their bands when they're happy. I don't feel like I would be pogoing to Don't Fade Away or whatever Oasis puts out this year. Do you know what I mean? That song, All Around the World. Like all those songs feel very like tired compared to these songs, like sad songs.
Yeah.
And this one just feels, it just has a different vibe that I really glad we got to talk about, because this is the great underappreciated band I think of Britpop. Everybody knows Oasis and Blur. The second tier is Pulp and Suede, and there's this like couple of bands in the background like Supergrass that had really nice careers in the 90s and going forward, and they just have not gotten the same historical appreciation that those other bands have. So I'm glad we get to talk about them. And
there is a geez, I totally missed it. There's a 2021 remastered deluxe expanded version of this.
oh, there is.
Yeah, it must have. It's got a second disc with a bunch of it. It's actually got Three discs. Wow. So it's got
Interesting.
a remaster of the album. It's got bonus tracks. It's got demos. It has a whole disc of live stuff from '98. Looks like their whole I'm listening to this stuff out of my library. I didn't even look at what it is on streaming. So
Hmm.
like they remastered the self-titled album from '99. They remastered Life on Other Planets, Aishikoko. Huh, pretty cool.
I did see that they were putting out singles when that was happening with like like one of the remastered songs plus like one or two of the bonus tracks. So, but I wasn't really paying close attention at the time, but now I will. So, if you'd like to be like me and be awesome and suggest a record, you can do so by going to digmeoutpodcast.com and visiting our suggest an album page. You can suggest for either our 90s rock podcast or the aforementioned 80s metal podcast. Jay, have you ever submitted anything to the Hopper?
I don't think so.
You just don't think you're going to win? You're worried
I
about,
don't
you don't
think
want to face the
I,
loss?
I don't think people like me.
That's why they've been tuning in for 14 years, is because they want to hate listen.
It hadn't
Yeah.
occurred to me until you did it, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think about doing that.
I'm going to
Maybe
be
I'll do it
very
now.
judicious about it. I'm not going to be throwing hundreds of albums in there. I've only suggested, I think, two. Maybe, is it like two or three? Something like that. And my previous one made it into the final but did not win, which was the Ruby record. And I will get revenge for that someday.
It was a good showing. You just couldn't get it over the finish line.
Nope, I didn't have enough cash. I need to get those Zucker bucks out to the people and help me pay off the election folks. So, like I mentioned, you can go to the digmeoutpodcast.com, suggest an album page, and suggest an album there. And you can vote on our Patreon by joining us at Patreon at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. That's where Joe and John, who have just joined us, are able to vote in these polls, vote in our album, Worthy Album, Better EP, Decent Single polls when our patrons pick records. Join our Discord, where we talk about all sorts of stuff. I don't remember what we talked about this week, but I'm sure it was exciting. There were things happening,
There's a
things.
lot of chatter on the new Jesus Mary chain.
Oh yes, it was
A
not
lot of
good.
hot takes.
A lot of disappointment on the, even the people who were like, "Oh, I love everything they've done," came back a week
Yeah.
later and were like, "Guys, you were right. I feel your pain, Vadim. I do." Uh, Patreon is also where you can read the Box newsletter. It is a weekly newsletter of new releases from artists of the 80s, 90s, and aughts when they put out new music. When we have books, there's the Darius Rucker tome just came out, and I'm sure there's more on the way. Movies, haven't had as many movies and documentaries as there should be. I feel like there's a lot of material to cover in the 90s music and pop culture that we could be doing much more with. We've had our Ray and our Johnny Cash biopics and our Freddie Mercury and Queen.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
where's some of the biopics from 90s artists?
I can't believe there's not a big budget
And they jumped.
Kurt Cobain biopic.
Like, we're getting an Amy Winehouse biopic. We completely jumped over the 90s, which seems appropriate. The Gen X decade gets
I don't
ignored
know, man. They're selling a lot of Nirvana shirts at
at Hot Topic.
H&M and no, at like super trendy, expensive
That's like wearing a
fashion.
Tommy Hilfiger shirt, except Tommy Hilfiger wasn't a band. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a fashion brand now. But like, uh the not mockumentary, where's the like a a version of Lollapalooza. Like get somebody to play Perry Farrell and like give me that like
Right.
story, dramatize that.
Think about how much like romancing we did of the 60s. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where's that from the 90s?
Exactly. There are going to be 4 movies about the Beatles, one on each member. We can't do the same thing for the Melvins. Like, doesn't Buzz Osborne deserve his own? Oh, that's all I'm saying. Just saying. Lastly, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback for the show. So for Jay, I'm Tim. We're out. I'll be back next week with another episode of Dig the Out.